Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second and final panel presentation of today. My name is Jonathan Decker, and I will be joined on this panel by the following guests. Andre, would you be so kind to introduce yourself first?
Absolutely, and thanks again for the invitation. Always a pleasure to learn something in these panels and to hear a bit more about what's happening and have the opportunity to share our ideas as well. I'm Andre Stein. I'm CEO and President of EVE Urban Air Mobility Solutions. EVE was the first company to graduate from Embraer Market Accelerator, Embraer X, and it was created just a couple months ago to really focus on urban air mobility solutions, developing vehicles, service and support solutions, fleet operations, and even air traffic management solutions. I've been around the aerospace industry for over 20 years, working in marketing, strategy. One of my previous positions, I was the head of strategy for commercial aviation. So I was one of the many fathers of our new commercial jet, the Jet C2. About 4 years ago, I moved to Embraer X as the head of strategy. I was one of the founders of Embraer X, where we incubated a few different projects, including the projects now became the basis for EVE, which, as I said, it is an independent company. It's a new company, but where Embraer still has a lot of investment and a lot of interest in. So we are part of the Embraer group.
Very good. Thank you. Paul.
Yeah, my name is Paul Beck. I am founder and managing director of Playground Airport Consulting. We are based in Germany, in Cologne, and in Amsterdam at Schiphol, and we're doing mainly development consulting projects, airport development planning on larger scale, but also into more detail, up to terminal planning and airside planning. Master planning is one of our biggest points. I'm a civil engineer from Germany. I worked for 10 years at NARCO. Afterwards, I became independent and built up on Playground, which is now in the air for 10 years already.
Very good. And last but certainly not least, Geert, would you please like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. And Geert Boosten, and I'm Professor of Aviation Management at the Aviation Academy of the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. So the students organizing the conference today, it's the 16th time I'm doing this with a group of students organizing these type of conferences. Very nice to do, and also to the students, they're very well done today, so that is always good to see. My background is a little bit similar as Paul, although I worked for Schiphol Airport. I'm an economist by profession. Worked at Schiphol both in airport operations and for a number of years also as Director of Corporate Strategy. Done a lot of work in terms of airport master planning, but also privatization, development of ideas of island in the North Sea, international acquisition of airports, etc. And currently also involved, and that's quite interesting, watching the presentations of both Paul and Andre. Also with our Aviation Academy, we're involved also in an association in the Netherlands, and Center of Expertise for Electrical Flight. I'm also a board member of that center. So it was very good and very interesting to see both presentations linking to the experience of what we're doing in the aviation conference.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that, and I wanted to continue in that direction as well. So, obviously, Paul and Andre, thank you so much for your presentations just a few moments ago, and I wanted to elaborate on the points you made, because you were both discussing the innovations that we now have within aviation and will receive in the coming years. And actually, that's my first question, which I wanted to start this panel off with. I wanted to ask. Looking at the future, who should be most responsible for implementing new innovations within the aviation industry? Maybe Andre, you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, I think there is always implementing the innovation. It's one thing, but pushing towards the innovation, asking for more. I think by the end of the day, the big leader of that is the user. It's when people require new solutions and ask, and when they have it, they move towards new solutions. That's what generates not only innovation, but particularly disruptive innovation. When look at what happened with ride sharing, for example, and people leaving the car behind, or with electrical cars where people actually start buying it, that's what really changed the industry. And that's what made the regulatory environment to move. Traditionally, regulatory environment tends to be to follow the industry, which makes sense. I think it's there. We are in the same page with the regulatory, the industry is the same page as the regulatory environment, in the sense that both of us have safety as the first thing. So we will always have an industry that's safer and safer. And to implement innovation there is always a question of am I jeopardizing safety that you can't, right? So we need to make sure we cannot rush in the sense that, okay, let's do anything and just try it and see if it fails fast. Cannot do that when you have people's life in our hands as well. So the industry, it's potentially the leading changer on the industry itself. Players like ourselves that want to disrupt the industry before someone else does, because someone else will. So one thing that I've seen happening in aerospace today is this provocation for a lot of startups. And just getting urban air mobility as an example, we have today over 300 projects worldwide talking about urban air mobility. So we as the legacy players in the industry, we have two ways to look at it. Just look at it, oh, that's not going to happen. I don't worry about it. Just sit down and relax. We are on the industry. It's not easy to do a new aircraft, right? That's a way to do it. The other way to do it, it's exactly what we're trying to do, in the sense that we're trying to combine all the know-how and the safety concerns we have with these new philosophies and the new technology that's popping up, and implementing it in innovative ways. So innovative ways to do business as well. It's not only about the technology, it's about, and I mentioned about the user being the lead player in this change. So it's about finding the right solutions to solve a problem. That's the key thing. And then implement technology, and don't be afraid of not delivering the same level of performance you used to. That's what disruptive innovation is about. Just to give the example again about electrical aviation, we cannot by any means today have a full airliner that's 100% electric. It's not ready. The technology is not ready yet to carry 100 people, thousands of kilometers, period. But we can use the same type of technology to fly just a few people not that far off. That's urban air mobility, something that wasn't there before.
Yeah, exactly. So we should start moving maybe as an industry to something that more embraces innovation and looks forward. Paul, obviously with your experience as an airport consultant, what kind of innovations are you thinking about using within your projects at the moment? What kind of innovations do you see airports making within the near-term future?
Yeah. I just quickly would like to respond to
of course,
one more sentence to that. I completely agree with you, and I mean that's always the three main topics and main issues, which is the user. Of course, the user needs to choose what sort of innovation will be a success, and prior to that, there's of course the industry. And whether it is disruptive or evolutionary, whatever, but they will need to develop that. And prior to that, there's technology. Okay, I completely understand and I completely agree, but I believe that there's one more aspect to it, and that is fundamental research. And this can only be done, and I think we are still in this state. This whole dynamic can start and start to roll whenever let's say the level of maturity of these technological solutions are about there to roll out. And I believe we're still in this at this stage at the moment where, for example, hydrogen propulsions or electrical systems are still need to be further developed, and I believe what's happening right now is very important with the EU Green Deal, that there's the regulator, the lawmaking, they're pushing funds into research, which is because that means that society and the government and the EU, that is the elected voice and hand of the society, wants this to be developed. And I think that aspect is also very, very important at this moment, so that it can ignite the whole thing. And after a certain point of maturity, of course, this is what you said, Andre, is going to be the dynamics that it has to take. Then the best solution will make the race. But I think we are still here, and it is. I can only endorse and subscribe to what politicians are doing at the moment. I just read in the news today there's another 700 million euros in funding for hydrogen propulsion research being agreed on in Germany, only in Germany, which is great. And that is the let's say the foundation where industry can start building up. And
exactly, yeah, that's a very good point that you bring up there, Paul, because we spoke about that in this morning's panel as well. The role of the European Union and governments in general in creating a more sustainable and innovative aviation industry, or transport industry as a whole. I have quite an interesting audience question, which probably elaborates on the panel from this morning, and I wanted to start off with your opinion on this, Geert. So this morning we spoke a lot about a long-term vision. We want to become totally sustainable in aviation and that sort of thing. So, but the question is, what about the short-term view? How can we make large gains in the short term? Geert, do you have any ideas with your experiences, both of course, as an airport specialist and at DEAC? What are your visions in the short term? What can we achieve to become more sustainable?
Yeah, just if you allow me, just responding a little bit to Andre and Paul. I think.
Yeah, of course. No, that's fine.
I come up to the question a little bit later on, and of course, innovation starts with vision, with bright ideas, with enthusiasm, and people who are willing to experiment and live up to their dreams. And then the user, indeed, Andre, is a very important driver to get to that idea. Fundamental research to get to new ideas is important, and I would like to say that for instance, if you read the book of Mariana Mazzucato about the entrepreneurial state, we see that a lot of fundamental research and fundamental technology has been developed and driven by not by the final user as we have today, but all the IT technology that we have also been driven by the US Army via DARPA, where it has been GPS is not developed by users, but developed by so I think that in innovation, and especially if you look at innovation in aviation, if we not only want to be disruptive, because urban air mobility is an add-on, is a new sector that, and I think is a new application of aviation next to and adding to the sector that we have. But if you want to be innovative in a number of issues, then we need to change an entire sector. And if you then dive into the literature and then also the research on innovation, we see that sectoral innovation is and transitions that are needed, for instance, for energy transition, for transportation, etc., are very complex situations that we just start to understand. And so yes, we need enthusiasm, but we need also very important is that governments apply, and then create conditions that we can change, and those conditions is not only the new thing, but it's also looking at the incumbents, is looking at pricing mechanisms and regulation, etc. That's important. And then asking the question from what can we do today? And today it means, and I think also Andre mentioned already, or Paul, it's not only developing new technology, it's make different use of existing technology. So for the next 10 to 15 years in regular aviation, as we know it today, we won't see a large influx of very the new aircraft being developed. Will take some years to get into service. What we can do today is to innovate by making different use of existing technology. Why are we flying from Amsterdam to Frankfurt and then to New York? If you want to be more sustainable, make sure that you change networks. If 20% of your aviation fuel is consumed by flights over 8,000 kilometers, we have to reconsider, if we want to be sustainable, we have to reconsider if non-stop flying is a good idea for the long run, or that we can. So what you can do in the short term is changing the way you operate today, but also asking the harsh question, not only to technology development, making different use of technology, but also looking at the consumer. Is the long-haul non-stop flight the ultimate thing that you want? Or if I change my economic systems, because that can I do much easier, internalize external cost. If CO2 prices become a serious issue in your ticket, are you changing your behavior as well? So a lot of innovation on the short run will be, I think, mainly driven by innovations and also using data, using better information towards customers, towards users, to create and to support them to ask different questions to the aviation industry.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very valid point. I mean, we're all again from this morning panel, we had the discussion and we were talking about, okay, what we actually also have to think about is changing the consumer's behavior, because we're so used to being able to do what we want, to be able to fly directly from Amsterdam to Brazil or whatever you want to say. But exactly, is that socially responsible, considering we burn 20% of the fuel on flights over 8,000 kilometers? But again, obviously, you know, short-term gains, and we can change the operations and think about, okay, well, how can we do that? But looking into the more long-term future, we have ideas such as electric aircraft and the urban air mobility, of course. And I kind of wanted to move that conversation along a little bit and see, okay, but we have current airport infrastructure. Is that ready to handle such innovations? Because maybe hydrogen aircraft or electric aircraft, or think about the Flying V, that's a totally different airplane shape to what we have at the moment. Are the airports of today capable, and what kind of changes do we have to see? Paul, obviously, I'd love to start with you. Please, your opinion on it.
Now, frankly, yes and no. But on the one hand, no, because airports usually are responsive. They only react on what's on the market, and usually too late, as we all know from the A380, and it has to be done then very quickly and so on. To adjust to code aircraft, so we all still have that in mind. But on the other hand, it is as far as this is concerned, in terms of a reaction, it can be done, or the adaptations can be done quite quickly, because in the end, it is only infrastructure. It is only brick and mortar. It is a piece of asphalt or area, or maybe an airport is a platform, and as such, it needs to be flexible. And we're talking about not something like about airports being super highly complex things. The only thing is that once an infrastructure is there, it is a little bit more difficult to remove it again, and because all the money has been deployed, the capital has been deployed, and that's probably more of the problem with airport. But in principle, I would say what airports should do is, and this is something that I keep saying for the last 10 years, 15 years, should look a little bit more ahead and anticipate the developments, and maybe even not only be a little bit more upfront and not only reacting, but also maybe even drive innovations. They could. For example, I give you an example. Avinor, for example, it's an airport, the Norwegian airport operator. They stated for themselves that the domestic aviation shall be electrical by 2035 or something. This is the airport. that states we want our operations being done in this way, and the industry has to adapt to that. And this is, I think, is a new model and a new role, and it could be as well applied to other city airports, for example, London City. Yeah, it could say like, okay, we only accept from 2035 on, we only accept zero emission aircraft. They could say it right now, and then the industry needed to react if they are eager to serve that market. Flying into the city centers again, but then they need to change. So there could be a role for airports also to stimulate the market. But at the moment, to answer your question, I think the mindset is different. Everyone says like, okay, now we're only reacting. We're only a secondary industry. We are only looking what others do, and we provide the infrastructure for that. But I don't think that's the mindset of tomorrow.
Yeah, so maybe we have to challenge the airports of today to have a more proactive mindset when it comes to new innovations and radical innovations that we may see.
Yes.
Andre, obviously with the urban air mobility, I'm not super familiar with the concept, but how would that work with the current airspace and airport infrastructures that we see around the world? How do you see that?
There are a few points here that I think are worth mentioning.
Yeah.
One, they're always going to be challenged, but wherever there are challenges, there are opportunities, business opportunities. So I think that's always a good way to approach it. And we are seeing a lot of companies and disruptive little companies sometimes offering different pieces of the puzzle. And that applies for urban air mobility, absolutely, because you're going to need not only to rely on the legacy, either helipads or current airports, but there is a need for a whole new infrastructure for that to really be viable, because it's not like one route in the city that would make sense. You're going to need to create a whole new network. For that, sometimes you're going to need to have like hundreds of skyports at a certain point within the city to really be a choice, to really be an option to catch a flight within the city environment. And the way you look at that, it's exactly bringing that disruption in small bits sometimes. And you mentioned air traffic management. That's a good example. We got you're gonna need. We know that you're gonna need to have sometimes hundreds of eVTOLs flying within the city, depending on the size of the city. And the current air traffic management system will not be able to handle all that many airplanes. But we won't start with hundreds of airplanes flying within the city. You're gonna start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. And so if you look on, for example, rather than just switching from voice-based traffic management to autonomous traffic management overnight, that won't happen. We can create procedures that will allow the eVTOLs to fly on the current regulatory environment, on the current with the current technology. You don't need to change everything at once. So being able to, okay, we can do that now, and do this now. So being able to scale that up, it's a way to look at it. Even within the airport, a traffic manager for the airport, it is a big thing, because you're going to need to have the small aircraft fly in the same place as the large commercial airplanes as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So allow for blocks of incremental improvement to end up with a disruptive improvement in the end. It could be a potential way to go. Same apply for other parts. And the other point that I think it's important, it's exactly the collaboration. Not try to do everything ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And always try to find, and that I think applies for airports as well, try to find the right partners that could create a bespoke solution for a part of the problem. Being it a skyport within the airport infrastructure, being it the charging. And that's something that excites me. It's the fact that we are seeing a lot of other players in the industry that were not on the aerospace business join in. So we are talking about electrification and the fact that you're going to need to have a grid that's capable of charging vehicles like this one that I'm flying right now. So we need the energy industry to be on board, and they are. We are seeing that movement. And that goes back to my previous point on say, oh, you need the community to want that. So we see first of all, the money flowing towards it, being it on the research, and I agree with you, Paul, on that one, being it on the base research that allows us to do what we're doing now, being it on the application of that, what you have. We don't need the final solution to be ready to start doing it. I think that's the beauty of it. You can start with the smaller things. You can start flying drones to humanitarian missions, for example. We saw that happening, and was a great way to start. We could start flying drones over people's heads just to deliver burgers. So how the industry did it? What is the biggest gain I can have? Yeah, for that is a good reason to fly above people's heads to deliver medicine in a poor part of in a poor country.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I think your statement beautifully complements what Paul already said. I think the industry definitely has to become more proactive and collaborative in terms of innovation and looking on how we can continue this innovation drive that we have within the aviation industry. Geert, I saw you nodding in agreement with Andre a couple of times. Is there something you would like to add?
Yeah, there are a number of very valuable points already made by Paul and Andre. There are a number of things I would like to add to it. Is first, if you ask the question about infrastructure and airports ready for the future, then it comes to mind that when we talk about airports, we often talk about the 150, 200 very big airports in the world that handle most of the traffic. What I find most challenging at the moment is where are we experimenting and where are we developing our knowledge on electrical flight? That's at a small regional airport in the eastern part of the Netherlands, in Teugen. And why are we doing that? Because we have capacity there, we can experiment there, but also that we realize that if we develop new type of air mobility, whether it be aircraft, electrical aircraft or urban air mobility, is that yes, we have the very big airports are very congested, huge investment, very difficult to change. Their flexibility is part of the design, but when you have to concrete, as Paul said, it's difficult to change. But we also have to be aware that for instance, in Europe, we have hundreds, maybe thousands of local airports that are quite very well fit to handle electrical flights, aircraft with 20 persons. So I think there will be a new network being developed also, not only because the big airports are there because of volume, but with new technology and new aircraft, you might also see new networks being developed, which are more a complement maybe to the high-speed rail and a complement to the existing aviation networks. But we don't, and I think Paul already mentioned in his presentation, we don't have to go to the big airports. We can use the underutilized small airports. There's one other remark I would like to make, and that's if we want to move to electrical flight and hydrogen. Andre mentioned the energy parties, the energy suppliers should be part of the equation. We're talking to them in the Netherlands as well. And what we learn and what we see is that if you want to recharge an electrical aircraft or an heavy vehicle, etc., our electricity grids need to be updated, need to be changed. Our production, the whole supply of electricity, the way the robustness of our networks for energy supply. The same counts for hydrogen. We talk about hydrogen, but to produce it in the amounts, the same as sustainable fuels. We used, pre-COVID, we used 1 billion liters per day. So if we even have if we have plants that can produce 100,000 liters of hydrogen per day, we can't, it's not so. My biggest fear is maybe not the adaptiveness of the airports itself. My biggest fear is how do we connect and make sure that if we use new energy sources to propel aviation, can we get it there? Can we source it and can we maintain it? And if we want to be ready in 2035, we have to start today by already changing and make infrastructure. And that's also part of the plans that, for instance, we are doing with our electrical flight. We're not only looking at the aircraft, but we're also putting a lot of energy in in learning from what happened in the automotive industry, learning on charging devices, on standardization, on certification. Those issues are as important to get the innovation up and working than only, let's say, the hardware. What Paul corrects us, airports are a platform of hardware. You can change that more easily than the other issues.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a very valid point, obviously, you raise. How do we create energy platforms which enable us to use these alternatives that we've decided to use within aviation, such as hydrogen or electricity? And I mean, building them is one thing, but ensuring that they're green and sustainable is another thing, because otherwise we would just be moving the carbon dioxide emissions and other emissions we create within the aviation industry to another industry, to the energy sector. So that's not really solving the problem. And I think I share that fear with you, Geert. I think that's something we definitely have to look at critically in the coming years. So is there a way in which we should regulate that dialogue between us as aviation innovators and maybe people from other sectors? How do you see that? Should the government take a leading role in that, or should you as innovation companies just go between each other, or do we need a third party within that? I'd be quite interested to know.
Yeah,
Andre, you can start.
Oh, sure. I think there's always a mix of both things. It's not about the government saying, "Oh, guys need to do that." There's some mandates that do help. I mean, for the industry to move towards the right direction, particularly the long-term ones. So that's the goal. You need to, and the less descriptive they are, the better. Oh, that's the goal. It needs to be. I don't care if it's hydrogen, if it's electric, if it's wind, whatever it is, but you have this high-level goals. So the whole society that helps the whole society to move towards that direction. But I think the key point, it's exactly not trying to solve everything at once. Looking at the building blocks and assuming that there might be good business in this building block. So there's a lot of things that could make sense on a smaller scale to start with to reach 2035 in a massive scale. And one of the builds of urban air mobility is exactly this modularity potentially, because it's much easier to think that one city will adopt the necessary grid, for example, than the whole globe at once. Yeah. Or even for larger aircraft, it's the same thing. We need to start somewhere, and have these pioneer countries sometimes do help. Having this, quite often smaller countries that say, okay, we'll do that here. And that's happening. And give the right regulatory environment for that to happen faster. And again, particularly focusing on the smaller blocks and introducing that disruptive solutions. And I really like the partnerships between the legacy players, the grown-ups in the room, I might say, with a lot of the startups. So we have that need to move that the startups have quite often with that know-how that has been accumulated. So I think collaboration and finding partners that can look throughout the ecosystem, assuring that your part of the equation is moving forward, but looking at the whole ecosystem, that's the key, finding the right partners to get to your point about, we are just moving the problem elsewhere where, okay, going to have electric vehicles, but someone will be producing electricity in a direct way. So that's not solving the problem. Agree, you need to look at the whole ecosystem, but at the same time, and that for me, it's the key. That's one of the reasons I jump in electric aviation in the very beginning of it. I'm not waiting. I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait the energy grid to be green for the aviation industry. Okay, now we can start moving, and it's just going to be another 50 years before we get there. We need to move in parallel and believe in a good way that, okay, that's going to happen. The industry is moving towards that direction.
Check. Yeah. Geert, you obviously wanted to jump in straight away, so now I'll give the word to you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. No, I very much agree. It's just start developing, start innovating also in new types of mobility. And it's not only the mobility itself. It's also you don't wait, but in the end, urban air mobility will also be connected to ground transportation, to all kinds of forms of ground transportation. So don't wait for the others to be ready and hand out. I fully agree. That's also the reason why for electrical flight in the Netherlands, we now are talking to the centers of expertise of automotive, because they already have learned a lot. We can skip a number of our, and then we can learn from their expertise. We can skip a number of routes and make different mistakes. Together with them, we start talking to the energy sector. Well, if we all want to, we're working to this. So what are you going to do to make sure that this can happen, and make sure that together you drive that innovation, you start learning it. And I think that especially for aviation, it's an international business. And maybe we are a very small country. If you fly a little bit more than 100 or 200 kilometers, you're abroad. So in Europe, standardization is very much important. And we need to get to not only to Dutch, but to European standards. That's key as well. So the EU plays a very important role in creating conditions. And it's not indeed describing, you should describing the solution, but creating the conditions for parties to come up with the best, most sustainable solution. And with development paths, it takes years to get to a mature industry, but give us the opportunity to change, to learn, to experiment, also to learn that some solutions won't work, but from there that you can take it to other instances. And that's something which is often difficult in the political domain, that we all want instant solutions. I think getting on the road, starting like Embraer X is doing, is excellent. We need to be learning. We need to get open platforms, exchange information, and that's much more important than trying only to debate from what is the best vision for the future, and not thinking how do we get there.
Exactly.
I think there's, if I may add to that, I think with regards to innovation, there is, and there's one big difference between all the other industry innovations that we have in mind at the moment, because at this moment, we have to think about what's driving this innovation, what's driving the developments. And when we are talking about industry developments, then of course it's economics, the economy, so the money talks. And if we have some better value proposition to offer to clients, either cheaper or better quality or whatever, then the market will regulate that. But what is the currency for sustainable, for a sustainable environment? There's no lobby group at the moment for someone who likes have to breathe clean air. There's no directly no money associated with that, at least not with the industry itself. So there's a little bit a difference with this new innovations of okay, how are we going to ignite these, and how are we going to start up with these innovations that going into a sustainability direction? Of course, there are some approaches on for example, taxes on CO2 taxes. So I'm not an economist on whether or not that will apply, but I would say it is in any case, I would say it is not up to only the industry, at least not at this moment. There need to be something else. There need to be vision. There need to be regulations. There need to be clear goal setting by governments to say, like, okay, up to this point, and if we don't have zero emission aviation, then you don't land, or then it costs you X amount. So I think there's also this dynamic that must be developed, and I think this is something, and I come back to your question, Geert, that you've answered just before. That is also a point that we can do right now. We can formulate and determine goals at this moment, like by the age of 2030, or by the time of 2030, we as a society want to have this and that. We want to travel like this. And industry, please go ahead. And we provide all support for that, and maybe funding as well. But this is these are the those are the borders. I think that is also, we cannot leave it all to the industry, to just industry dynamics.
Yeah.
Oh, I fully agree, Paul. But that's, for instance, what happens in the cities with automotive industry. Yeah? In Germany, in the Netherlands, cities we don't want to have polluting diesels in the city. You've got 5 years or 10 years to change your engine. How you do it, that's your business. But we want to have zero fine particles in our cities. So. Yes, that's also that's the reason why I mentioned also the book of Mariano Mazzucato is if we set those issues, but as Andre said, leave it open from what the final solution is, but set the standards, define for what should be met. Then innovation the industry can support it, and indeed make clear that within a number of years, if you don't apply, then you're either out of business or it will become so costly that it's very difficult.
Agreed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an overarching idea that we should have within the aviation industry. We should see our own responsibilities when it comes to innovation, but we should also look for opportunities to collaborate with other parties within the industries in general and see how can we come as a society to the best solutions when it comes to sustainability and moving people from point A to point B. Because we're almost out of time, I just wanted to wrap up by asking all of you the same question, and just very briefly, in 30 seconds, I wanted you all to answer the following question. So I'll start off with you, Paul, and the question is as follows. For aviation to become sustainable, we should. So please fill in the blank for me. What should aviation do to become sustainable?
We should immediately start transforming our businesses and starting with a new mindset. And as airports, I speak for airports, anticipate what's going to happen and work towards that. Be visionary. That's, I think, the very first point we have to do.
Very good. And Andre, obviously to you the same question. In 30 seconds, how can we make aviation more sustainable?
Collaborate within ourselves, establish goals, establish standards, collaborate with other industry to find the right solutions with the automotive industry, for example, don't be afraid of trying new things. It's one thing to be conservative about safety, and that's right. We want to have the highest level of safety, but don't be conservative when it comes to new business, new ways to make it work. Focus towards the same goal together and collaborate within the industry, with competitors, with other players, and with other industries, and mainly with the user and the community by the end of the day. Listen to them.
Listen to them. Yeah, they are the voice within reason. Yeah. So Geert, finally to you, to make aviation sustainable, what should we do?
Well, to stay in line with the conference today, I would say that and also looking into my core businesses in educating and training students, the best thing to do is to train the next generation professionals who find it very important to become sustainable, who are open-minded and also well-trained to start changes in the existing business. We discussed before, aviation can be very conservative, so we have to train a lot of people who enter the industry in the next coming years who are fighting that conservative mindset and come up with new mindsets so that we can implement the solutions that are already available.
Exactly. Okay. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in for this second panel presentation. It's been an absolute honor to host it. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. We will now go back to the host who will wrap up the day. So stand by for one moment while we get the host.
Thank you for hosting.